UNESCO Chair of Digital Technology Design with Indigenous peoples at the Namibia University of Science and Technology. A team of researchers is exploring a powerful way to bring Indigenous knowledge into the classroom through virtual reality. The project is looking at how immersive virtual reality can support learning by preserving and sharing cultural practices such as Jutwansi hunting methods. And the goal is, of course, to then one day make these experiences part of the learning journey for Namibian primary school learners. Joining us now to tell us more is Selma Awala, the researcher on this. Very good evening to you. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you, actually. Very, very interesting initiative that you are leading here as a researcher. Let's start with the bigger picture. What are the main goals of this project, and how does it actually connect to the efforts, including the Indigenous knowledge in our national curriculum? Yeah?
The main goals of this entire project is kind of to support learning of Indigenous knowledge, but we're using a different approach, using virtual reality. So in virtual reality, we have these different experiences that we've already tried to imitate, right? So like the hunting. But we've noticed that when we take it to the primary schools, the kids play it as a game. So then our big effort is like, okay, how can we bring Indigenous knowledge, or how can we make them learn all these important artifacts and information in these experiences? So then we went on another tangent to kind of design learning supports. So tools that can support learning inside the virtual reality experience. That way we can kind of create, or we can convert this cultural virtual reality experience into a learning experience for the primary school kids.
And it's actually quite fun and practical at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
That's very interesting. Now, why did your team actually choose to choose virtual reality for this? Because what makes actually virtual reality a good fit then when it comes to teaching young children about Indigenous practices?
So because Indigenous people are more practical, right? So all of their traditional practices is a doing thing, right? And also when they teach their young people, it's a teaching through doing, right? So VR allows us to replicate the specific scenes and scenarios in which students can or learners can do the exact same thing that is also in the village. So it's just us mirroring whatever is in the village, and you can have this whole immersiveness, and you can touch objects and you can play around with objects as well. So that's why it was a better choice than a tablet or a video game, for example.
Very well. Now, I understand you worked closely with partners from the People's Primary School in Katutura. What was that process like, and how did this actually help the kids shape their learning tools?
So for PPS, we have an interactive tech library that we've been kind of designing with them. So the kids have always been co-designing educational technologies with us. So it's nothing new for them. So the whole entire process was just them kind of trying to figure out, if they're in this cultural VR application, which was the hunting, right? How would they want to be helped to learn about all these different items, like why the bow and arrow, what the poison is made out of, why do you need to track the kudu, how to track the kudu. So then they designed their own learning support, which was like a non-player character, who would kind of guide them throughout the entire experience and explain to them the importance of this object, why you're actually taking, what the mixture of the poison is made out of, and so forth. And then they also went into their normal teaching classrooms. Okay, what is in the classroom that also helps us learn, which is obviously a board. So then they also had us kind of implement this, information board inside the virtual reality application, so that they can always go back to it whenever they're kind of lost in the VR space.
Very well. Now, your first VR experience focuses on Jutwansi.
Yeah.
Did I say it right? Okay,
I mean, we're never really saying it right.
So it was on the Jutwansi hunting experiences. How did you make sure that what was shown is not only accurate but also, importantly, respectful and culturally sensitive?
So the original hunting experience was co-designed with the community itself in Donkerbos. So we have a community in Donkerbos. So they did from the sketches of how they're supposed to look like in the virtual environment, and then when our team also 3D modeled all of how they're supposed to look like in the 3D in the virtual environment, we took it back to the community, and then they had to validate and say, okay, yes, this is how we're supposed to look like. And then the narrative that the story was told by an elder, and then we had to create the different scenes of the narratives, take it back to the community, and then they were like, yes, this is all correct. So every little step that we take, the community has to validate until they say, yes, this is okay for the rest of the world to see, this is okay for it to be converted now into a learning experience for the children to learn.
There you are. Yeah. Now, you're also working on an assessment tools rooted in culture and pedagogy. What might these actually look like, and why are they actually very important for the learning experience?
Because they are learning cultural things that are supposed to be experienced in the village, right? And in the village, they have different ways of assessing whether a child knows how to hunt, for example. Yeah. So we need to go consult back the communities. What are these matrix? What are the rubrics that are going to be used to actually identify and see that the child has particularly learned? For example, in the hunting, the community could say that it's if they track the kudu correctly, because in the VR experience we have footprints of the kudu and footprints of the cheetah. So they need to determine, okay, if the children are able to identify the tracks correctly, then they've, past this level, So that's how we're kind of trying to develop these assessment matrix and rubrics from the community's perspective of how they also assess the learning in the community.
Very well. Looking ahead, how do you see this, influencing the education policy in Namibia? And do you actually hope that it actually gets expanded then to include also other indigenous communities as well? And just another question that I have is, virtual reality can be quite an expensive practice, and we hope to have this, to see this in many schools. What is your hope for this to actually be invested on and of course dispersed in all the schools across the country?
One thing I actually hope for is for us to start using different methods of teaching rather than, the textbook. Our indigenous languages are not documented. Their culture is also not documented. They also don't teach via, reading a book, right? So we need, the policy needs to kind of expand on what we can use to kind of teach all of this, indigenous knowledge that is not technically fitting that notion of fitting in a textbook, right? And also because most of our applications that we've built are in the original language itself, so it's not even in English. So that way we kind of keep that whole thing of children are supposed to be taught in their mother tongue. You understand? So that's one thing, that's the vision that we actually kind of have. And dispersing it to communities, we always want to start at, indigenous communities, but we'll also go to the local knowledge, like of our bamboo knowledge that is also out there, that is not preserved, that is not being continuously taught. So that's kind of like the bigger picture. In terms of virtual reality, I think government needs to kind of invest more on creating this tech innovation, tech inclusive library at People's Primary School, where we're trying to implement using the technology for basic reading, for basic math, and all of those things. So we're supposed to move into a different era from just a textbook.
Absolutely. Selma, thank you so much for